So we're starting with Bob's painting here of the wet street scene, the shoppers on a wet day. And I like this a lot. It's good. It's captured the atmosphere beautifully. There's definitely a sense of there being a lot of rain and water about here, the softness at the edges of a lot of these shapes. Probably just needed a little bit more strength in some of the closer buildings. You know, if you can sort of imagine a bit of color, let's just grab a pen here. Imagine that we had a little bit more strength in these nearer buildings, but that could still be done now. So you know, a little darker again, warm, darkish, warm colours probably around about this area here. But the figures are fantastic. As I say, you've definitely captured the wet scene, the wet day scene here, Bob. And I do like these figures. The figures are excellent. They all seem to have individual character about them. There's the little monument back here. Perhaps that's a little bit strong for how far back it's meant to be. Perhaps we could just take a damp brush and soften that off a little bit. But overall, Bob, it's an extremely good job. Yeah, definitely in terms of catching the atmosphere and the weather conditions of the day. So yeah, great start to this critique. Next up is Christine's. I like the definition in this. I like the good strong darks against the lights. Yeah, the trees are good. The trees are maybe a little bit stunted. They look like they've been pollarded a little bit. You could possibly give these trees a few more limbs, I think, Chris. Let me just sort of show you what I mean here. So imagine that this tree seems to be confined to the shape of the buildings up here. You can see there's not much creeping out beyond that edge there. And it's always good to take our trees beyond anything else that's behind them in the scene. So try not to be, you know, influenced by the other shapes that are in your painting, particularly the shapes that are directly behind the object. You've done much better on this side, actually. It's they just look as though they've been pollarded a little bit by the local tree surgeon. So it's always good to give trees plenty of limbs, because that's really what the tree is about. The tree trunk alone, even though you've done a fantastic job with the tree trunks, I must say here, particularly love this one on the left here. But a tree, really to express a tree and all its loveliness, it's all about the branches, and a good tree trunk is essential, which you've definitely achieved here, Chris. But let's give them some elegance with those limbs. In France, we'll see lots of roads, you know, aligned by pollarded trees, and that can be quite effective. But I think wherever possible in this sort of situation, we'd expect to see perhaps a few more limbs on the trees. Figures are fantastic. Like the effects of water, of the wet scene. Yeah, overall, that's a very good job, Chris. We have Hilary. Yeah, I like the trees. These trees certainly have plenty of upper branch growth in them. And the figures are good again. Quite nicely spaced out. I like that. Just about the right strength. I like the fact that you've played down the monument down here. You know, you've given it it's slightly grayed off. Oops, let me just go back a second. You've given the monument its correct sort of strength of paint, you know, a lot of water in that mix, which is good because it was meant to be, you know, a bit further down the street, let's say. Buildings are good. Possibly could have made some of the edges, particularly to the tops of the nearer buildings, a little harder. These are a bit soft. just a little bit soft, so a bit more angular. Okay, it's okay this side. There's good angles on those, but just bear in mind, I mean, don't go as heavy as this black line that I've just put on. It's just that these are the limitations of the pencils in this application that I'm using. But yeah, just give some consideration to how hard buildings, buildings are made of brick and concrete and mortar, and they sort of convey they need to sort of convey a bit of a hard edge to them in the nearer shapes. Quite rightly down the back there in the buildings, you've softened those off, which you'd expect to see. But overall, a really good job, Hilary. I do like those trees. Figures are excellent. And I think the scale's pretty spot on, actually. Head height's all right, all correct, more or less on the same horizontal as its flat ground. So yeah, really good job there, Hilary. Yep, well done. And we have Liz's finished piece here. Yeah, it's good light in this. A nice play off between warm and cool. Like the trees. There's a lot of dry brush used in this painting. I don't think that's a bad thing. It seems to sort of work okay in these weather, in this sort of wet scene. So it's probably quite, I think it's working because of that. I think we've got a lot of softness. So I'm doffing my hat to you here, Liz. I think you've played the softness of the background and the buildings and the sky. I think you've played that off quite nicely against the dry brushwork in the figures. Strangely enough, if we look at this figure over here on the left, which is softened or softer, this figure here, that works really well because, this is something that I've mentioned, I think, in the past, is that you should really be trying to soften edges off, soften shapes, the edges of your shapes off at the very edges of your paintings. So I think that works quite well. The only place I probably would put a harder edge is probably the tops of the buildings. Just about here, you just need a slightly harder edge. It's no biggie. I mean, there's something about buildings, they just need a slightly harder edge, I think, just where they lie against the background sky here. Overall, again, this is really good. A good effect of reflections and the wet surfaces. And yeah, I do like that playoff between dry brush and the wetter washes. Works well. Yeah, good. And this is Pam's. Love the way these paintings are so different. We've all put our own stamp on each one of these. And very much the case here with yours, Pam. There is a very slight sort of almost Lowry-esque about this scene. And the figures are really good. I think the figures are really good. You've played down, done all the most important things with our figures. We've kept the heads the correct small size. We've softened out the legs, as you'd expect. Whenever you get people walking around and moving around, this character here is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, sorry, I was saying how we've softened the legs, which always implies movement. There's a very small issue here. It is a very small issue. The head height, there's a little bit of conflict with the head height. I think these two guys here look okay, but when we look at this person here, I mean, I suppose in your defense here, Pam, we're going to assume that this adult here on the left, I'm not talking about the child that they're holding hands with, I'm talking about the adult. The adult is quite short because their feet are lower down than these two chaps on the left here. It means that she's closer to us. Now, if she's closer to us, she could be shorter than these two gentlemen in real life, but she'd still look a bit taller. It's a subtle thing, as I say, and why, you know, I could be nitpicking here. So just bear it in mind, though. It's funny how the eye can pick up on something like that. I think if she was just a little bit taller, the scale and her position would probably look about right. But if that's all I can pick up on here, Pam, then I think we can safely say you've done a grand job of this in this painting. Because I think the figures make this, and the buildings are very good, and I haven't even mentioned them. I do like the geometric feel of the buildings. They have presence. I can't take my eyes off the figures. I think they're fantastic. This is a very tall person over here. Okay, you know, so be it. A very tall person. They do exist. So the monument, probably a bit small, isn't it? Because the monument, if you look at the base of the monument here, where the monument meets the ground, okay, where the monument meets the ground is down here. Now, the legs of this person is a bit further on than the monument. Because of that reason, his feet meet the ground here. That means the monument is the other than this person here, the monument is the closest thing to us. So that monument, if we could chop that, if we could take the monument off the plinth and place it next to this person here, that monument, that figure is going to be only about that high, okay, compared to this chap here. So really this monument, because they're life-size, they tend to be life-size, these monuments. We'd expect the monument, if it was sat here, the plinth to be something like that, and then the figure on the plinth to be about this size here, something like that. So it's just a scale thing. I wouldn't worry too much about that, Pam. It's something that, you know, you can work on and consider again when you're thinking about your scale of things. But as I say, I can't take my eyes off this off the figures. I think they're really excellent. Well done, Pam. Okay, and here we have Rogers. Like the trees again, Rod, you've given us a different time of the year, and there's nothing wrong with that. Excuse me. Yeah, the trees work well. I think you've applied the foliage to the trees really well, not overworked, nice and solid. No messing about with those with the foliage on those trees. Maybe the trees could have a few more branches. And just think about the depth of tonal value in the trees. They're all about the same. You know, let's assume, I think we can agree that this tree down here is the furthest one away from us. Okay, so we would expect it to be not as dark as these. So it's got the same value, strength, darkness to it as the others. Really what we need to do is think, well, if this is the closest one on the right here, that would be about right. That would be that type of that strength of darkness. But these three, this one's slightly lighter, the one furthest left. It's a shame in a way that you didn't make that one even lighter, because I think that would work. We could accept this one as it is, accept that one as it is, and accept that one as it is, because you have paled this one off, but you really need to pale off the furthest one down there. And just give some thought to the scale, Rog, of the figures. Okay, they all look about the same height, the same sort of size, meaning that they're all approximately, what, 200 yards away from us, the viewer, with the exception of this one person over here. But having said this, I've got to say that I think the figures that you've put in, albeit whether their scale is slightly suspect, the shapes and the activity that you conveyed in the figures is fantastic. Really lively. They're going about their business. They're shopping, or they're going in between on lunch break or something like this. Great figure over here on the right. Favorite one out of the scene there. I like that. And an overall balance, I think, of tones and colors is really good. Is spot on. Yeah. So just bear a couple of those things in mind that I brought up, Rog. Nothing insurmountable. So good work. Now we've got Ron's. Okay, another good painting. Again, I like the trees. I like the textures that you're producing in this, Ron. And there's a good sense of softness around the feet and leg areas. You know, and that does convey that sort of really wet. You know, we've had a real serious downpour here on this sort of spring-like day. And what I like about this painting is the more you look at it, the more it gives. There's these mother and son, or mother and daughter here, walking towards us. Very convincing. I think our nearest figure here is walking away from us. You can see by the small amount of head that's showing that the shoulders are up at the back there, you know, so which suggests that they're walking away from us. I think the buildings are okay. I think whereas some of us have decided to show the buildings more here without much of a definition to the edge, I think you can get away with this. It's sort of hiding behind this left-hand tree that's near a building, so you have given us the edges elsewhere. And I think you've done just about the right amount of weight of line and paint strength here to make us believe that, you know, we're looking down a street and things are disappearing at the furthest end. Yeah, it's a good job there, Ron. Nice color balance. Yeah, a convincing wet day. Shoppers on a wet street scene. Good work, Ron. Okay, we next have Sherry here. And the first thing that strikes me here, I think, Sherry, is it probably looks a little bit quiet. By that I mean there's something that I think we needed a tree on the right hand side. There's a sort of incomplete sort of sense to it, I think. If we'd have had, and you can still do this, if we'd have had another tree here, I think you'll see what I mean if I just put one in now. By the way, folks, you can, this is just a Photos app that comes on the computer. You can upload your photos into this type of app and do as I do. So you can sort of try things out. Take a photo of your work, upload it into this drawing application on your computer, and have a play with things as I'm doing here. Because if we just put another tree over here, I'm not dealing with color here, folks. I've just taken a grey pen. But if we could get the balance, even possibly another tree, you know, sort of coming in here a lot closer, and I think you'll see what I mean about that bringing the balance. We must always consider balance, even if it's only the last thing you check before putting your brushes down. Before you put those, you think you're done with the painting and you're putting your brushes down, just stand back, or even have a break for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, have a cup of tea, come back to it, and then check the balance. As I said, I think that would make quite a difference there. A couple more, perhaps slightly heavier branches on this tree to show it as nearer and closer. And yeah, that you see makes, I think anyway, and I hope you agree, that makes quite a difference. They probably give some reflection, these trees. But yes, overall that's a good painting. It just needs that balance. Be a little bit careful. Let me just clear the ink away from here for a moment. Be a little bit careful with figures. We've got figures here up in the air a little bit. I wonder whether they should, their feet, their legs here should have been down there, so they'd be about there somewhere like that. Yeah, just be a bit careful with that, which is interesting because every other figure is absolutely spot on. If we do a sort of eye line, we're spot on, you know, other than those that were there. I mean, you know, if you're telling us perhaps that if you're trying to convey that this is a shop entrance and there were steps into the shop, that it was a raised doorway, then I would put the steps in if I were you and try and show the doorway off. That you know, that's the reason why your figures are sort of seem to be floating there. Yeah, be a little bit careful with the lines around the buildings. Great reflections, the best I think so far. I think these are wonderful reflections. Nicely done. Yeah, like the man with the bicycle. Yeah, good work, Sherry. As I say, just bear a couple of those things in mind. And you know, if you get 5 minutes and you have the inclination, try putting in another tree or two. Probably one if it would be better, and probably one big one coming in right from the side here would probably be best in thinking about it. And then limbs, of course, that come across, because I always try to, whenever I'm dealing with avenue type sort of scenes, I'm always trying, if I can, to get the two nearest trees to link up by crossed branches. You know, you don't have to do that, but you would expect them to if the trees are close enough. And sometimes it can look like for some reason the artist has actually avoided it for some reason, because in real life you would expect the branches to interlink, to be, you know, sort of something like that. Looks a bit heavy now, I know, but hopefully you get the gist, the point I'm making. Yep, good. Okay. And we have Julie's here. And as I said earlier, how incredible it is. And what I love when I look at these, when I'm doing these critiques, is just how different each person's work is. It's all about your individual personalities. It's fascinating. So, Julie, I think your figures are fantastic. Yep, I'm checking, you know, the usual thing, head height. You could make a little bit more of some of these buildings, because the building scale is, I think, pretty perfect. But what you might need to consider, let me just grab again a pen here. You just want to infer the odd extra mark. It doesn't have to be a full-blown window that you're making a shape of. It can just be as little as a bit of paint on the end of the brush smudged downwards or upwards, but in a vertical fashion on the face of that building. And often that's enough, because there's certain areas you can't really leave too blank, too plain. And I'd do something similar here. It's just to infer it. Remember, our game as loose, our role as loose style impressionistic painters is to infer. We don't need hard statement, we just need an inference, and something like that can make quite a difference. So bear that in mind. So if I erase them, you can see what I mean. There's a need for something within that area, I think, just to sort of to take the flatness out of it. Trees are great, figures are great. The overall effect, the remit of our exercise was to create a scene that looked like a wet street, people going about shopping, etc. And that's, all the boxes ticked there, Julie. So yeah, just bear a couple of those things in mind that I brought up, and hope that helps. Suzanne, yes, sorry, this is Suzanne's. Again, very different, a very textured paper. I'm guessing this is probably not, it might in fact be a rough paper. You might want to drop me an email, Suzanne, if you have the inclination. I'd like to know. It does look like a slightly heavier textured paper, and I'm only bringing that out just so that we can compare this to others. It does give a beautiful granulation in the building over here. I like that a lot. This area over here. So let me just look at these. I think we could probably do with a few more figures. It's looking a little quiet. The figures you have put in are very well spaced. I like the frequency. The what I tend to sort of my phrase I coin is broken repetition. That's when we're dealing with the same subject, shape, object, whatever you want to call it, but breaking up the symmetry. And I like that a lot. I like the way you've placed the figures against the light here, and softened figures off outside, just round here. Got good edges to the buildings. Trees look good. The trees could be a little busier. I think another thing I could bring up, it's not so much with yours here, Suzanne, because looking at this tree on the left, I think that's fantastic. You've done what I was about to sort of what I meant to mention for a couple of others of us, and that is when you're putting trees in, do try to overlap your limbs. If you overlap the limbs in the tree, it gives the form far more depth and dimension. So it's a good example here, Suzanne, particularly in this left-hand tree here. It's a great example of that very issue. Overlap the limbs, have them intertwining. Like the colours in this, great sense of a real bright blast of light onto that wet street. Softened back quite nicely at the end of the street there. I think there's just enough information, a glimmer of, a hint of windows, even down here. That's good. I like this. Yeah, and that's a grand job, Suzanne. I think that brings us to the end of this critique, folks. Well done to everybody for participating. I'm sure that we all benefit for this, and please keep them coming. I hope, I never intend to put anybody off submitting work for the critiques, because it's a brave thing to do, and I fully appreciate the courage required sometimes to submit our work. But none of you have anything to be ashamed of. I can assure you that there's good work throughout here, and so do please keep them coming. Thank you for participating on this occasion, and we look forward to seeing you at the next critique.